Chapter 11. Sunday afternoon. On her return trip home, Doreen thought about Clara's case and finally concluded there were so many possibilities as to suspects that the number had to be narrowed down. She thought about going back and asking Clara about it and decided against it. Doreen slowly walked home, studying the avenues, studying the roads. This was a dead-end lane, so somebody who drove down here would have to turn around and come back out again, which would increase their chances of being seen. Not very smart for a kidnapper. Now Crystal did live at the last house on the block, so somebody could have just carried her right down into the ravine and out to the next street, and to a vehicle. She wondered how many people would think of going that way. She herself would, because it would give her more cover. Which kind of said her mind was going off in the wrong direction these days. As she went across the road, she stopped and stared back up at the house where Crystal had disappeared from, to see Clara coming toward her. This time she had on a vest and her running shoes. Doreen wasn't sure if Clara had her own purpose for coming out for a run or if she wanted to talk, so Doreen carried on her way but moved slower. When she heard her name called, she turned around and saw Clara with a frown on her face. "You did have a reason for coming here, didn't you?" Goliath wound through her legs, but Muggs barked a couple of times, then just sat and stared at her. Clara ignored them both. Her gaze stayed locked onto Doreen's face. "Obviously you know I'm interested in cold cases," Doreen said simply. "I wonder at the circumstances of this one." "It's hard to imagine your daughter's life being reduced to a cold case," she bit off, a little temper attached. "I'm sorry." Doreen winced. "I didn't know your daughter, but I feel for both of you. I'm just getting to know who she was." "She was a wonderful, bright, outgoing, bubbly young girl," her mother said warmly. "She wouldn't kill a spider. She'd pick them up to move them out to the bush. And how many people could possibly know where she slept?" "Not very many," her mom said. "She just moved into that bedroom a couple months earlier. Her father had used it as an office before. When we divorced, I moved across the road so we could share custody of our daughter. She'd come back and forth but could still see both of us if she wanted to. It was not as common a methodology for divorced couples back then, but it was working for us." "You have no idea who could have done this?" Doreen asked curiously. "Her stepmother," Clara said. "Crystal and Mary never got along." "Was Mary there the whole time?" Doreen asked. "She moved in a few weeks after we separated," Clara said, her voice stiff. "And you'd think that, after all this time, I wouldn't care. But it still rankles." "Of course it does," Doreen said, perfectly capable of understanding the woman's mindset over being replaced. After all, that was exactly what had happened to Doreen. "What about friends, family friends? Anybody you know who had a record or had any kind of suspicious or overly affectionate relationship with Crystal?" The woman winced at that. Honestly, in the previous months, it had been pretty rough. Nobody was coming by because of the divorce. "I know Crystal complained bitterly that she had lost a lot of her friends because she couldn't have them over anymore, and that was causing some trouble with her and her father too." "What was her relationship like with her father?" "Very loving, very caring," Clara said gently. "It's one of the reasons why I moved across the road, so we could both be involved in her life. Crystal loved both of us," Clara said. "And then Mary moved in, and I know Crystal was no longer as happy to be over there." "Is Mary still there in that house?" "With Eric?" "Yes." "Did they go on to have any children of their own?" "No," Clara said. "Neither have I. When you devote 8 years of your life to the most precious thing in the world, and then somebody takes it from you, it's pretty hard to recover." "I'm so sorry for your loss," Doreen said. There was a moment of uncomfortableness while the woman nodded, her gaze searching Doreen's. "Do you think you can help?" she asked abruptly. Doreen shrugged. "I don't know," she said as honestly as she could. The fact that I've had beginner's luck looking into several of these cases gives people an overconfidence in my abilities. But that's not necessarily true. Besides, Mac is helping you too, isn't he? Or I'm helping Mac, Doreen said with a chuckle. He's not allowed to tell me much about any active cases. I can get the same information from witnesses myself though, and that helps. Of course, I have a transcript of the TV show that was produced to try to find Crystal too. Clara nodded absent-mindedly. The footprint appears to be the biggest piece of evidence, Doreen said. But it's not much to go on. The police thought I did it, she said abruptly. And I immediately thought Mary did it. You're a nurse. I highly doubt you wear high heels, Doreen said. But it's a great way to throw off the police's suspicions. Exactly, and Mary runs a clothing boutique downtown, she said. She's always dressed up. Which would then make it obvious she was involved, Doreen said. No, I highly suspect it isn't a female at all. You have to remember, or maybe you don't even know, Clara said, Crystal was tiny. She was 8, but she was the size of a 6-year-old. She would never be more than 5 feet tall. She was a beautiful china doll. And it still hurts so damn much. All I can say is that I'll look into her disappearance, Doreen said. No guarantees though. I'm hoping your reputation is not based on beginner's luck, Clara said, because I really want answers. But more than that, I want my daughter home again. Suddenly she burst into tears, whirled around, and ran back up the hill to her house. That left Doreen standing here, awkwardly watching as Clara ran, her long legs eating up the block as if she were used to running. And with that kind of stress, maybe jogging was an avenue that helped her to deal with her loss. Doreen didn't think she could deal with it anywhere near as well as Clara had. Doreen turned slowly and headed back home again. Well guys, for better, for worse, it looks like we have ourselves another mystery. Because no way I can turn my back on poor Clara. And I especially can't turn my back on poor Crystal, she said. Muggs woofed in agreement.